Hi there folks, this video is my attempt to answer some of the questions on how to build buildings and so forth in Grand Tactician Civil War. Now that the 1.06 economy update has dropped, gone live to everybody, folks aren't really sure kind of what they need to do, what shouldn't they do. So I'll talk a little bit about that, but my kind of opening observations are that I wouldn't worry too much about building. In this playthrough, the economy, I would say overall did fairly, it did well enough. My view is always it just needs to do well enough to provide for troops in the field and allow you to continue to get food and things to them so that you can go on and kind of win the game in other ways, because it doesn't seem to directly affect the outcome of most campaigns. So in this campaign, after 2 years, I had done almost no building. Dozen markets and 2 railroads. Credit rating was actually 1.6%. It was A. I then in the next 12 months did an experiment with building lots of buildings to see if things mattered. And I'm actually now playing in the past because I've run this through November. And spoiler alert, Lincoln loses the election and the thing ends. This number is about 150 million. The supply depot costs are down around 40 million. The interest costs fall to 19. The interest rate falls back to 1.73%. We go up to triple B. Like this, it actually gets slightly better from here in many ways. So we were doing well before we started doing the buildings, and it doesn't really appear we've done too well after. The one mistake I think you could make, right? You don't want to do $400 million in building if you have a high interest rate on your debt. I'll leave it to you as to what you think it is, but you can see the Union is paying more than 3 times for their debt what I am. They also have almost 3 times as much debt. Now, whether they can pay for it, right? That's their problem. But for you, what you don't want, right? You don't want the interest cost to read like the construction cost, because when they balloon up that much, you're going to kind of run into a spiral of debt. So I would say when it comes to buildings and you're worried, do less, do little, maybe even do none. And I would bet that you can probably still do pretty well if you manage your resources and play smart. If you want kind of money advice, about a year ago, this number was about $100 million higher, in the sense that I was spending almost $180 million in supply depots, because the AI kept walking up to the borderline, kind of the border of control, building a bunch of supply depots, attacking, losing. I would come back to reclaim the area. I was restocking the supply depots with my stuff, and then when I left and the Union came back, because I was letting them hang around, they were taking all our stuff. So we had to continually resupply these supply depots. So now just burn them, right? If you're going to play like the kind of defensive on either side, but particularly in the CSA side, where you're just going to look to hold the loyal states, when the AI comes up and they build all those supply depots and you take a hold of them, just burn them. Because otherwise you're going to end up paying to restock them. And it's one of the other reasons I believe the AI's economy runs itself into the ground on those supply depots, which are no longer, if they ever were, cheap. Right? I think they can be $15 million or more. And so when you're doing several of those and losing them many times a year, the cost adds, it really does add up. So that's a way to save up money for other things. I would also say that I'm pretty sure that there are multiple features in the economy of this game that are not working as intended. I hope they're not working as intended. And some of the stuff at a macro level doesn't really make any sense at all. So this is our long-term economic, nope, that's our long-term economic performance, which is just this gradual, long, slow decline I've seen forever. And yet, per person wealth, you can't see it. It's further to the left. It happened earlier in time. It actually started around 0.33, 0.35. And it had only crashed to there because an update to the game crashed the per person wealth of both sides. Late 62, early 63, I was already around 0.46. So even though this represents the last 12 months where I engaged in this massive building spree, don't assume that that is all attributable to the building a lot of buildings. That may just be, this upward trend started before the construction spending spree started. And so it's yet another reason why I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea what works. I can tell you in the cities around the clusters I've built, and I'll show you those shortly, the per person wealth is reported as being wealthy or prosperous. And so I think, at least locally, that matters. I don't know if that's because of the clusters or simply because I just built national banks on top of those clusters. Or it could be all the above that are contributing to the local uptick and probably being captured by this gradual uptick anyways. But I was here before with far less industry. So keep that in mind. All right, I'm going to turn now to something I've created for everyone. I'm going to put the links in the description. They don't look pretty, but I think they get the job done with a little bit of explanation. So, these are Google, what are they called? Drawings? Never used them before, but they are my attempt to visualize where stuff comes from. So we have no pre-goods, and then we have one level of pre-goods, two level of pre-goods, and so on, up to the two most complex, which I believe are locomotives and transport ships. But the point of no pre-goods means that there's nothing that has to be produced as a good before them. They all come from somewhere. And remember, with mines, you cannot build them. You can only upgrade existing ones. Coffee import only, you can't really do that. The other things you have some control over because you can build a salt work. Why did I write walks? It's salt works. But anyways, it's just this is a work in progress. So if you find errors, spelling and otherwise, you can go ahead and let me know. I'm sure they are in there. This is very tedious, but in the end, it did help me learn quite a bit. And I'll point out before I forget some of the things that I realized in here that led me to believe something that I think was ultimately wrong, which is that I thought sequencing primary ingredient or precursor goods for construction would lower construction costs. I haven't found any evidence of that, but bricks do go to construction sites, and there is no heat map for bricks, so presumably these can be built everywhere. The CSA only starts with one brickwork in the entire nation. And so you can build them out in other places. They seem to be profitable, regardless of where they're placed. But they, at least as far as I can tell, they don't really reduce construction costs. That was one of the things I learned there. You can see there's some questions I'm not sure the answers to. And so if anybody actually knows for certain, I can always add more to this. Wood for construction sites, that ends up being a big one. We go into gradually more complex goods. I believe iron can go directly to construction sites, as can one of the things it produces, which are machine parts, which can go to construction sites. Those are the four goods I recall that can go to construction sites. And then if you choose to build National Bank branches, it reports that it will lower construction costs. I've tested the brickworks, the lumber mills, and the banks, or I believe in the banks, and I've never seen any evidence that they actually lower new construction costs. There's a specific example I'll give you later where I really tested this out, but I don't see that actually working as intended, or it's so complex that it's basically wrong. The most complex, locomotives, okay, and so you need machine parts, steel and iron, all right, all that other good stuff. And so as you go backwards, this is the most basic stuff, right? In case of locomotives, unsurprisingly, the roots of a lot of this are all mines, and then some of the buildings they have to go through to produce this stuff. And the other big one is transport ships. I guess, I don't know if that's surprising or not, but machine parts and wood, you go to troop transportation, sea and river, IIPs, and all that other good stuff, and what you need for that. And then you'll see in here, these are kind of the stuff that I understand a little bit better, but there we have the 3x level of precursor goods. Do we have small arms ammo? So we're at 2x here. Slightly easier to make, and yeah, so you spend some time with that. I'm not going to spend all the time explaining it here, but hopefully, as you're thinking about how to set stuff up and what you might want to build, and how do I get more food, for example, well, you got to kind of understand what undergirds it, because if you're just looking at, oh, well, I'll just put factories around, might work if it might be dumb luck, or it might just work perfectly. It's really hard to tell whether the game is operating as intended. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, first 2 years go by, I don't really have any buildings constructed, and it doesn't really matter. But I figured, this is a good time to test and see how things go. So I also slashed tariff, sales taxes, and income taxes to half of what they had been maxed out at. And it's also, so this is another reason why it's surprising to me that with the reduction in taxes, we still actually have slow long-term decline, even while we have tax cuts, massive, we would say, stimulus today, and it's reflecting in a growing per-person wealth. But at the macro level, for whatever reason, it ain't showing up. Having said that, I had two kind of hypotheses about what I thought would matter when it came to building buildings well, and they were creating clusters and sequencing. Clusters, I think there's more to than sequencing, although a little bit of sequencing sometimes makes sense. So I'll start with clusters, but the idea there is just putting together, right, when you go to build stuff, you put together a lot of stuff from the early to the late. And if you're going to concentrate particularly on industrial stuff where you can't control a lot of the elementary level precursor goods, you got to go to where they are. This is an area I kind of happened on, but I mean, you can see where it is, right? So it's around Knoxville, but as an industrial area, it's not a bad idea for a lot of reasons. I kind of built like half a cluster here. I built the other one up in Beverly, Virginia, or West Virginia, and then I kind of half clustered onto the existing cluster in Nashville. But why I think this area is particularly good, it's got lead, it's got salt, it's got coal, copper, and iron. Additionally, when it comes to moving stuff in and out, it has railroad line, and it's sitting along a river. So I think all that stuff helps. I tried to supplement that. This heat map is showing the influence of markets by building, basically chaining markets together, upgrading them. That's kind of where you sometimes see the really dark red. I think those are usually upgrades rather than just, building two really close together. But sometimes I did that as well. I don't know that maybe the direction of the movement, I thought there was a lot more usage up here. I was trying to get originally some stuff up. What really started all of this were the problems with Catherine Furnace, which of course it doesn't show up now, but a long term they had problems with very high input costs. And I thought maybe getting it out of here, because it's connected via rail, at least so far as to Lynchburg and to Richmond. And then I think it could probably travel up this line as well and get to Catherine Furnace. It didn't really work out that well, and I think it made more sense to just produce locally. There's a recent kind of report on the Steam by one of the community testers who pointed out that in the game's design, there's a very small geographical area where industries will look for precursor materials. And so you can, of course, mod it. It's one of the nice things about the game, but I didn't really want to do that. And so if you're going to have a kind of industrial development area, because you're usually tied to things that come out of mines, and again, it's this stuff, and you're limited by geography as to how far they're going to go, I think this is one of the stronger areas to do it. Again, Nashville's not too bad, except, right, so we got iron over here and coal over here. If those two were closer, it would be nice, because remember what coal does is it creates a kind of productivity boost to the mining of other stuff, copper, iron ore, and so that's nice to have. But Nashville had the benefit also of many railroads and just a major river coming through. So that's why I added on to that one. But that might be something you want to think about, and then just locating a lot of the different levels of production in the same place. So it starts with mines, then it usually goes to the furnaces. This furnace here, assuming that iron is worth more than iron ore, they're doing okay, right? Because the outputs would match the inputs. Now the copper ore at 2.8 in, bronze out at whatever. All right, so it's doing okay. There was already an existing Thomas Riggins Ironworks. I believe, though, there was no foundry here. And if I'm wrong, you can let me know. I'm sure you will. But I upgraded our iron mine there, our copper mine there, the coal mine. I thought there was one that's like in the middle of the woods or something like that. Maybe it's that coal mine. I don't know what it is, but Thomas Riggins had some problems originally, but I'm pretty sure that things have, for the most part, recovered for him. A lot of this in and out stuff, I mean, to figure out if something's profitable, of course, you could just find out, right? So you go to the buildings and production tab. It takes forever to pop up when you're trying to show people. But that's what it works. You don't want to look at everything. We just want to look, we'll say Ironworks. There aren't that many to begin with. And where are we? Thomas Riggins. So we want to know the value of the production. It's absolutely skyrocketed. They're not, it doesn't look like they're that much more efficient. They're dealing with a declining workforce. Profits, again, what this red and green arrow mean? I don't really understand it. The value of the production has soared, though. And it'll at least show you their outputs. Yeah. So that's how you'd find the kind of individual stuff. But the idea behind the clusters is to just kind of co-locate them all in the same spot. And that, I think, is one of the better places to do it. The experimental one I had up here in Beverly never really turned out all that well. You can see that the ore prices are exceptionally high, and I think it's the bronze that the foundries, well, I guess we'll find out. Bronze, it's only selling in small quantities, but it's not doing all that well, and so I think that this is a perennial problem. I'm surprised at this problem because I'm not sure if it's not coming to these foundries, and it was never getting over to Catherine Furnace. One of the things I tried for the life of me to figure out was where does the iron come from? So you have to, all right, so it comes from this IAP. Well, that tells me something. But then where are they getting their iron ore from? Oh, wait, that's telling me where they sell it to. But I guess that's kind of the problem, right? We don't know incoming where it was or anything other stuff. So you're kind of left to guess with where the precursors are. But when I tried Catherine Furnace before, I clicked on all the IAPs around it, and I could not figure out where the original source of iron was. And it's saying low demand here. Oh, all right, maybe. It appears that the clusters aren't a bad idea, especially if things are place bound. And again, I've played this campaign in game on for about 5 or 6 months after this, and level of wealth per person in Knoxville, it says prospering 6 months later as well. Nashville was doing quite well. I don't know that Grafton ever made much of a difference, but yeah, so we're wealthy over here. In this area, mills are one of the things that I added here. It doesn't seem like a terrible idea. One of the other things you want to think about when you think about clustering is, yeah, you want to kind of cluster the sourcing of goods, but you also might want to be near something to sell. It's one of the big problems with this area is that there aren't, right, you got to find places to sell all this stuff. But when it comes to small arms, I think production and ammunition sales, I think that's basically you, right, the person. And so that helps. But remember, from the production charts, a lot of this is all going out to citizens in the end. So there has to be enough around that want to produce some of the stuff that have a consumer purpose. So it's really hard to tell if the clusters work or not. But again, I'm kind of inclined to think that they do. What seems less clear is that sequencing works, and the idea behind sequencing for me was once I did those production, whatever the heck I called them, lines, was to try to get things that produce a lot of stuff necessary for construction sites to get them to do it and then start building a cluster. And so the problem I saw over here is, and this is, right, so we got a lot of these alarms going off, and we have a bunch of companies that are doing poorly. Now this is a little odd because it shows up as an alarm that makes you think things are wrong, but input costs are $9,000 per year, but the stuff they sell is worth $43,000 a year. That's profitable. And they're identifying low market prices of crops, blah, 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 blah. All right, fine. Same story here, slightly different, and I guess it's because the maintenance cost is $25,000. When you subtract that out from the difference, which is about $6,500, it's not a profitable enterprise. And I thought there was a similar problem up here, but it's not registering. So my solution to that problem was to, well, let's try to build some mills that will increase demand for crops. And before I built the mill, I was like, well, brickworks, they're supposed to, produce stuff for construction sites, so we'll put that really close by. One of the other things I did, and I guess I'll re-click it here for you, I was like, well, wood is expected to also contribute to construction costs and all that other good stuff. And so one of the problems is that there's not great fertility here. I mean, back in the area around Knoxville, it's like 75% wood. And here it's not very high. But I did plop one down. It comes in at the cost of $1.8 million. I've done this. I'm not going to do it again. But it finishes. And then when I go to actually build the mill that I want, and I plop it down right here, I don't know what it's going to show up as. Okay, so it shows up as 1.6 million. Now I'll tell you, in the test I've done before, where there was no brickwork and I just built it, it cost 1.6 million. In the test I did off camera, this was done, the mill was completed, and then I built it, it also cost 1.6 million. The only difference was that I spent money building that and the brickworks, and so it actually ended up being several times more. And one of the other things that happened, oddly enough, was that after the lumber mill was constructed, and this was in the process of being completed, both of these economy alarms and the one that was up here, all three of them went away before the actual mill was completed. So I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to make of that. My initial conclusion is it probably wasn't worth it to do this because there are the initial straight costs of doing it. Now you could always say, well, the costs aren't really a problem. Like $2 million for those isn't a problem, because even though it shows up as a cost, the actual way you deal with it is through debt and the interest payments. And if your interest is 2%, you're not paying $2 million really. I mean, you are, but what you're looking at in terms of a new and additional cost besides the one-off cost of building it is the 2% interest on the $2 million in borrowing that you had to take out. So depending on how much you want to really confuse yourself and run in circles on this stuff, it seems like you end up spending a whole lot of money. Okay, maybe not so much, but the payoff also seems really, really limited. One of the challenges, so one of the things I will say that happens long term, like once you get through the 24th month, it's railroad lines start opening up much faster. And I also invested in getting their times down, but it's so slow so early on. But in something like a mill, where it is, here, get rid of this, and look at the flour mills. All right, so this is the new one we're constructing. Mills are, and I don't think, yeah, it's not going to show us anything yet. They are just straight crop in, crop out. And I guess I should remind you why I did this. Why build it here? So look to the right of this panel. When you're doing something like this, it seems to make intuitive sense that you want to build where the price level of sold goods is very expensive and the price level of pre-goods is very cheap. That is exactly what this mill is, right? So if I built another one here, right, the crops, as we learned down here, are very, very cheap. And crops are the only input the mills seem to care about, and the stuff they produce, flour, is produced at a very high cost. And so we should expect giant margins, or at least I would expect giant margins. That's the kind of theory. In terms of national average, it doesn't really work out like that. So if we go over here, right, there's no big surprise because of the way that flour is made. It's right, crops in and flour out. So it's about a 3-to-1 in terms of income versus outcome. If we have average prices, I don't know what they are here, but one way I guess we can find out is fake building another mill and see what happens. So it wouldn't really make sense to do it here because the pre-goods are a little bit cheaper than the sold goods, but I think basically the input is going to end up becoming the output. And so it doesn't seem like it's worth the money to me, but if that's something you want to do, you can. If you want to get some sort of ballpark figure about what's going on, mills are really easy because it is just one input, one output. Look at the average price of the good. So it's just under $13 per unit of crop. But on the flour, which is your output if you're a mill, the average price is about $45. And so the ratio, right, of flour is 3 crops to 1. And so, now, did that really just jump up to 13? It really did just jump up to 13. But that kind of helps me prove the point. Multiply 13 by 3, and I hope you get $39 is what it costs in inputs to produce a unit of output of flour, and therefore they're only getting about maybe $5-6 on each unit of flour that they put out. So in order to really make quite a bit of money, they're going to have to do a tremendous volume of flour production. And then you got to go back to your charts. All right, well, who's using flour and what are they using for? And do you need to construct new industries that might be able to do that? Make sure that the wealth per person in the area is high enough that citizens are demanding and continue to pay high prices for flour. I mean, those are all the kind of knock-on effects. But what this test was looking at was whether putting the precursors or the construction items there will make construction costs lower. I found no evidence of it. And again, it's supposed to be machine parts and iron, which I didn't look at, but also wood and bricks are inputs into constructions, and I didn't see anything. I also didn't bother building a national bank branch out there, but I've done it elsewhere, and it doesn't really make any sense. And while I'm on the topic of things that don't make sense, if I want to upgrade this, it's not too bad. It's $2.9 million, and that's just using subsidies. And I know that subsidies are cheaper than if you don't have the amount of subsidies. I do know that. Make and mill. If I want to upgrade this, it's going to be $2.9 million. So basically the same. And I think they were doing about the same volume of business. No. The making mills are actually doing like a third of the volume of the Nashville mill. Yet the upgrade costs about the same. Okay, well, whatever. What makes no sense to me are the Shenandoah mill upgrade costs. And just the upgrade costs in this area seem to be through the roof. It should be... No, I'm too far south. Right here. If I want to upgrade this sucker, I have no... $380 million. I don't... Right? And if I wanted to do it through subsidies, it says it would be $76 million. Right? And the overall volume is only slightly higher than it is back in Nashville. I don't understand this at all. It appears that it costs 20 times more to upgrade the Shenandoah mills from level 1 to level 2 than elsewhere. It doesn't make sense to me. And if wood is a big deal, right? I bet that there's a lot of wood in this area. 62% fertility for wood, 74%. There's a lot of stuff that's being produced locally. And this is an area where iron is produced. If that is supposed to be an input in construction cost sites, we have railroads coming through here. We have heavy market influence, and this very heavy market influence that's moving stuff. I have no idea why that upgrade is so expensive, but I've noticed weird things like that. On the brickworks, right, the CSA only starts with 1. There's no heat map for brickworks, so I assume that means that brickworks can go pretty much anywhere. And at least from my very limited experience with them here, let's get the mills out of here. Let's put the brickworks up. My goodness. They seem to do okay. So this is the one you start with. The value of this is odd, right? It's one of the other odd things I can't quite explain, but maybe. Value of production goes up. They're as efficient as they can be. By the way, when these Leavenworth brickworks get up and running, they will reach maximum efficiency in about 2 months. They appear to show up as max efficiency already. I guess because they only do bricks. I guess that's what that's showing. Workforce has declined. Profits have declined, while the value of their production has gone up. Okay. I've seen that time and again with different goods. Just about every good is on a downward trend, right? Just look at the red line. That's for the CSA. Then if you go over here to buildings in production, and we're going to get a lag spike here, but once these actually filter in, what you'll notice in a lot of industries, the value of the production is going up, right? So we got plantations there, farms, values going up, saltworks, values going up, mines, right? Values going up. I can't explain this. We'll okay, look at some of the manufacturing stuff, right? Numbers are all going up, yet the prices of almost everything is falling. The only thing I can think of is that they're making up the difference in volume. And that's why, so the price of the stuff they're selling and also the price of their inputs have been falling. So for the manufacturers that use a lot of precursor parts, they've benefited from falling costs elsewhere. But the stuff they're selling is also selling for less. So it kind of makes sense, but it's also really puzzling why all this value is being added on top of other things, and yet the economy as a whole is reported to kind of be in the stinker. So that was the Flint Hills experiment with flour mills and crops. Again, it kind of worked, because as soon as it seemed like they heard the mill was being built, crop prices went up, and that problem was resolved. Although I believe that that flour mill, once it's built, will then operate at a loss. And so you have a choice. Do you want the loss on your farms, or do you want it on the mill that you've created after you've also spent money on brickworks and lumber mills that you probably don't need to build? All right. Believe it or not, this actually was relatively short. Some things to look at in other other views. And also, I figured that when you click on this quick map overview and then click off once, it usually, let's see if it works this time, it erases telling you what comes in and out of a place. Okay, so now that didn't even work, but this is kind of useful to remember what's going on. And things I might look to test out are some coal and iron possibilities over here in what is marked as Indian Territory, Kansas, Western Missouri, right? Because we have lead there, right? We don't really care too much. I mean, provisions are great and all, but well, fish just appeared. But we have salt here. We have abundant wood, coal. You see, we got a lot of coal, but I don't see a lot of stuff to use it with. I don't see copper. I don't see iron, but it was one of the ideas that might be a development corridor here, but it looks like a lot of the industry could be based here. And then also in Missouri and Kansas, there might be some, I guess we can also look at shortages and oversupply. Right now we're doing pretty good. We have above average stocks for a lot of this stuff, so maybe put some factories out here and create some demand for the surplus sheep and all that other good stuff. Right where you have abundant salt, you got to do the things that use salt, which is usually, I think, crops to be turned into provisions, but they need factories. So again, that comes from our production chain stuff. But if you're looking to soak that stuff up, you could certainly think about that. Factories would also be good here, right, for using the niter, converting it to gunpowder. The problem with trying to do too much in the way of crops up here is that the fertility is really low. And by the way, I have a complaint. We really ought to be able to get at least 2 of these filters on at once, even if it's a heat map plus one of these. Like, it would be so much better if I could also click on and have the heat map come on for the fertility of crops, and then also take a look at fertility for rice, because rice, I believe, is also one of the precursor paths to provisions. So that might be something I test out, whether we do some sort of development thing out here in Missouri and Kansas. Might be some factories, some agricultural factory stuff that you could do here and use up these materials. But I really see a nice kind of natural area to produce. A lot of the industrial stuff that you need if you're going to do a CSA campaign right here in eastern Tennessee. Let's see. On to the end here. The random observations about buildings. Oh yeah, the heroes of, or what appear to be kind of heroes of a lot of this stuff. Am I on this? All right. Yeah, I was on this. Oh, perfect. Well, these are plantations. Not exactly what I was looking at, but farms in particular are nice because they're just straight outputs, kind of like brickworks in that sense that there's no inputs. It's just, you have the building and it produces some stuff. It seems like if you look at volume, plantations always do less, but that's why you got to keep in mind the price of what it is they're selling. So sugar and cotton, right, if we're going to compare those, $32 for cotton, sugar, which off the top of my head, I cannot remember what sugar goes into. I might not have put it on the production thing, and it's a big miss. So here it's low for us. It's 47, or it's lower than it used to be. When you compare it to farms, which tend to have, I know we built some farms up here. It's the one we built. Farms look great, and they're these kind of virtuous cycles where they kind of produce their own forage and then consume it, but they always produce more forage than they consume, and then they produce all this other stuff, right? So I don't even know how much 3,000 pieces of horses. That doesn't make sense, 3,000 pieces of horses, but right, so they require some forage. they're really cheap. It's hard to know, I think, what these units are. Like, I don't think a horse sells for 17, but whatever a unit of a horse is, there it is. And so they seem to generally be quite profitable, but you got to keep in mind that a lot of the stuff that farms sell may be quite cheap. Fertility of crops, right? So if you hover over it also, it tells you what it is, but we know when we go over here, we'll at least know what the average price is, right? Which is about 13. And if you want to kind of cheat your way and find out kind of even more, like what it is, you go to here, you go to farms, and it'll tell you, right, when you look at environment to the right side of the panel, that now pops up and then the numbers change. And notice that here we're within the little cone or whatever it is of some national bank branch. I don't think I'd be too tempted to build here, because everything is very expensive. Stuff coming in and stuff going out is very expensive, but we'd at least know that. 100% available workforce, more fertility in crops. You know what? Right, so you don't usually want the pre-goods to be relatively expensive compared to the output of goods, right? If you use inputs, which I think in the case of a farm is just forage, you probably don't want to do that, but you got to keep in mind it is more complicated than that, because farms produce lots of other stuff. And all of this is for 12-month, kind of a 12-month basis. So keep that in mind, but they are, I feel like they're generally profitable, and they are frequently the first step in larger production chains. And of course, Nashville is one of those concentrations with mills, ironworks, foundries, factory, national bank branch. It's got I thought there was a port of Nashville here somewhere as well, and it's near rivers and railroads. And so you want to keep those things in mind. Oh. Well, I'm not going to make this any longer than it has to be, but one of the things I noticed from economic reports is that it appears that there's some sort of fixed ratio. It may not be fixed, but I noticed that as exports go up, as the CSA, imports will always go up more. And so in absolute terms, as your export volume increases, you'll actually proportionally import more. I haven't tried this now with toggling the tariffs back up, which might have been a reason for the growing trade gap. Again, there's so many things that are moving at once, never mind different versions of the game coming online. Final comment, I built a lot, probably 10 or 12 national bank branches. I think they're cool. Oh, what did that say? Yeah, well, tells you what it does, right? It increases private wealth. That seems to be right. Lowers construction costs. I haven't seen that yet, but it does lower maintenance costs. So you can find out by how much. I don't know why that mill is not. Oh, it is. You see the little money icon? It's telling you that it's within range of some national bank branch. And basically, I think this is the benefit, right? It saves like $4,000 in upkeep each year, which, all right, fine, like that's good. But if it cost you $6 million to build, it raises private wealth. It doesn't appear to lower initial construction costs, but maybe it lowers maintenance costs. You could think about it. I've upgraded them again, so that's usually like another $3 to $6 million or whatever it is for the national bank branches, and it does help keep lower your interest rates. So I think if you have low interest rates to begin with, you could actually take the debt and build these new branches. I would probably try to keep them around industrial and population clusters, because if this is fixed by a geographical, probably like a circle that emanates out from the bank, you want it to capture where people are because it's going to raise local private wealth, which should reduce demands for a lot of consumer goods and so on. And remember, factories and a lot of these other things, they're selling things eventually that end up going to consumers. So you do that. All right. Concluding observations. I did not do anything in here about supply depots or ports, except to say to burn the supply depots you're not going to use, and I would say in general, don't use them. What are these numbers next to? I know that they mean something, but I don't remember what it is. But to try to show you, do I own this port? I don't own this port. When I did, that port capacity had like a capacity of 1, and to upgrade it to 3, it was going to cost a lot. Okay, that's not going to give me the option. Okay, here we got a port. Well, St. Louis is probably pretty big. So actually not really. Transport capacity is to go from 3 to 8 will cost me $80 million as we are, or $16 million in subsidies. All right, from 3 to 8. Keep that in mind. We go all the way down here. Where's the port of New Orleans? Why am I not seeing it? Well, we could take a look at Baton Rouge. Just no. This is go 3 to 7. That's in. That's not a good example of what I'm trying to show you here. Okay, it's blocked here. But for this capacity to go from 68 to 129 actually costs less, right? So the subsidy funding went from 16 million to 11 million. Now I can't explain that. I don't know why it's cheaper here. There has long been a national bank branch. This is the one I think you start with in the game, which is the Bank of New Orleans, and I think I upgraded it. And so I don't know if that's pushing the upgrade costs down. Maybe. But you're going to get a huge boost. You're going to get a boost of about, what, 60? 61 plus 161 transport capacity for, we'll say, $11 million if we could fully subsidize it, or you can get a boost of 5 by spending $16 million in industrial subsidies by boosting the port of St. Louis. And just do one more. I don't know what the answer is here. What happens if we try to upgrade the port of Nashville? So this would go from 18 to 37. It's better than St. Louis because you would net 19 capacity, but it would come at the cost of 16 million. So again, here, the national bank isn't the explanation because both ports have a level 2 national bank, and it's, in one case, the cost is very low, and the other isn't. Construction complete. I think this is just telling us about the stuff that happened out here before. So I don't know enough about ports. I do know from the economy alerts here, well, from earlier economy alerts, that we were not producing, it looked like, any of the transport ships, and there was a pretty big demand for them, and they are the most complex, along with locomotives, right? The most complex products to build. So that's definitely one of the areas I need to do this. But my last point is the point I tried to lead this with: don't sweat building buildings. It appears that you can largely ignore them. Do a little bit, you can do some stuff with the projects, but really good macro management, good supply depot management on your part to keep your costs down will help. Don't take on crazy amounts of debt doing stuff you have to do. That'll let your interest rates come down. And if you want to build buildings later on, you can. But unless you're just role-playing very hard to do something, maybe you want to kind of role-play your own southern industrialization, or maybe, the North already had tremendous agricultural capacity in the actual Civil War. But if you really want to go bonkers with that, then, go ahead and do it. But it just doesn't seem like it really matters all that much. Low interest rates in this game really bail you out if you do want to go on a spending spree. And so I tend to think by default, you're going to make more errors by building a lot than building too little. and kind of just letting the economy play in the background and manage your expenses is probably the best way to go in this. I really hope a lot of this stuff gets a second look by the folks who are in control of the game. There's stuff talking about in another video. Actually, at this point, it's going to be other videos about how some of that stuff might work to offer compelling dilemmas. But it's kind of starting to feel like the policy and project tree. A lot of this stuff doesn't seem like it's worth taking unless you just want to handicap yourself, and that's not really compelling gameplay. So I don't want to leave it on low note. I hope this did help, and yeah, I will be bringing more to you. Probably the next one will be a review of the economic performance in this campaign. All right, folks. Until then, take care.